But she's she's shown herself to be a pretty tough customer in these debates and in this campaign. So people are not quite sure where she'll go, and I think that will be something to follow over the next couple of days.
Brendan O'Connor, Associate Professor in American Politics at the University of Sydney. I appreciate your time, Brendan. Thank you. Lila, a lot more complicated than New Zealand politics?
Oh, well, a lot more technically complicated.
Yes.
All politics is pretty bloody complicated. I'd really hoped I'd get through this entire US primary campaign without having to make any comments on it. I mean, there's just so many words, aren't there?
Yeah.
And so many kind of analyses of the minutiae, and here we are sitting back just hoping some bugger can beat Trump.
Okay, Andrew, what's your thoughts?
Basically, if the Democrats want to beat Trump, then the only chance they've got, I think, is with Biden. I think Donald Trump would, if it was a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren co-ticket, he would just eat them for lunch with all his little tweets and everything else stupid he does.
Don't you find Biden kind of deeply unattractive, though? And
I don't think any of them are particularly attractive, quite frankly.
Well, Trump was impeached, or not through the whole process, but over the sort of Biden-Ukraine allegations, he's had multiple demonstrations of general sleaziness. I mean, as you know, with US election campaigns, how that kind of personal character becomes, okay, so Trump proved everything I say right now has changed, I know, but it's like, is he just going to out-sleaze him?
No, I just think the average American, they'll just portray Sanders as a communist, and they'll probably use exactly that word, and it'll be sort of a repeat of our Reds under the beds sort of election campaign from
turnout's
years ago.
Thing, isn't it? And he didn't get it in the primary.
Very, very briefly, by the way, Lila says, someone says, I recommend Alien Weaponry, heavy metal music, all in Te Reo Māori, so that's a good one
I've heard them. Yeah.
Briefly, the drought, and before we head away into Checkpoint, how is your team? How's the community going on that?
It's a bit of a challenge across most of the North Island. Taranaki, Horowhenua, they're probably the greenest out of the North Island. Everyone's got good supplement cover, feed from the spring, but we're chewing through that pretty quickly. Big challenges drinking water for stock.
Right.
There's certain areas like Tararua, they got real challenges with bores running dry, creeks running dry. Same thing happening in Northland. So hopefully there's forecast rain for next week. So, but we're going to need 6 or 7 drops of decent rain.
You need a lot of rain.
Yeah, not all in one hit though, because then that brings up another adverse event. Yeah.
Oh God, it's a serious issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, Lila Hare and Andrew Huggett. I really appreciate your time on a Thursday afternoon. Lots of response on heavy metal, libraries and the rest. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint next, and I'm back for Friday, 3:45 tomorrow. See you then.
Koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, 3 corona cases confirmed plus 1 probable and 1 suspected awaiting test results. The latest, a man in his 40s, was likely infected with COVID-19 by a close family member returning from Iran. He hadn't left the country. 2 other Auckland schools are notified they have students from infected households. Samoa counts the costs of a downturn in tourism amid the coronavirus, and rural doctors prepare to treat people in their cars if need be, as patients are warned not to wander into medical clinics unannounced if they have symptoms that could be the virus. And allegations immigrant grandparents are unfairly being kept apart from their grandchildren. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. The country's newest case of COVID-19 appears to be the first caught and transmitted here. A man in his 40s contracted the disease without having travelled to a country that has the virus. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says he caught it from an older family member who had returned from Iran almost 2 weeks ago.
I would classify this as a case of family transmission and local transmission. There is what appears to be a very clear link between travel to Iran recently by family members and this man who lives in the same household.
Ashley Bloomfield says the older man who travelled to Iran is this country's fourth probable case. He will also be tested, although he is no longer sick. Dr Bloomfield says public health teams are tracing all possible close contacts, including those on the flight from Iran and a medical centre where the man with the confirmed case went. The country's two other confirmed cases are people who have visited Iran and northern Italy. Parents at an Auckland school say they're reassured after hearing from officials. The latest coronavirus case is a man whose children go to Auckland Grammar School and Ormiston Junior College. At the Ormiston school, some parents say they wanted their children to stay at home as a precaution. One woman says she was worried initially, but not so much after getting more information.
As advised by the school, and I think it was also on the internet, that nothing to worry because everything is being done, like the proper step is being followed, and so just need to put our faith that everything will be okay.
A parent at Ormiston Junior College. The Ministry of Education said the children have had no symptoms, so there was no danger to other students. The Minister of Police has confirmed the police watchdog has been investigating the Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement. Mr Clement has been widely tipped to replace the Police Commissioner Mike Bush when he leaves the role next month. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Independent Police Conduct Authority says the investigation has, quote, just been concluded and a report will not be made public. The Minister, Stuart Nash, wouldn't answer RNZ's questions as to whether the investigation is holding up the appointment process.
I'm aware that the IPCA is looking into Mike Clement, but I'll leave it at that.
Police Minister Stuart Nash. A police officer has described waking up in pain as she was raped by a colleague in Northland last year. The evidence was heard in the man's trial in the Auckland District Court today. Annika Smith reports.
In a DVD interview, the woman told police her colleague raped her in a Kirikiri motel they were staying in during Waitangi commemorations. She said the man groped her while alone in a room together during a social night of drinking with the group. The woman said she rejected him and went on as normal, but later woke up in pain to find him raping her in her bed. The man has pleaded not guilty to charges of sexual violation and indecent assault. His defence saying the encounter was a consensual, pre-arranged hookup. Ko Annika Smith aho.
The Chief Ombudsman has called on the Waikato DHB to address overcrowding and the use of seclusion and physical restraints at its mental health unit. 4 reports by Peter Bosher have been tabled in Parliament today after unannounced inspections in September last year. Andrew McRae reports.
Peter Bosher found treatment and conditions in 3 out of 4 wards inspected was degrading and the result of overcrowding. He says the situation in the 3 acute mental health wards is untenable. Mr Bosher says high use of seclusion and restraint, lack of privacy, blanket restrictions, compromised care and limited opportunity for recovery are indicators of a facility in crisis. He says the issues need to be dealt with urgently. A new facility is due to open in 2023. In Hamilton, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
It's 4 minutes past 5. The Blues have handed Akira Ioane his first start of the Super Rugby season. Ioane has missed out on the number 8 jersey so far thanks to the impressive form of 21-year-old Hoskin Sotutu. But with Sotutu rested after the Blues' 2 wins in South Africa, the one-match All Black gets the number 8 jersey for Saturday night's clash with the Hurricanes in Wellington. The Hurricanes gain 2 All Blacks with Geordie Barrett returning at fullback and hooker Dane Coles back from injury. The football Fern striker Sarah Gregorius chalked up her 100th match for New Zealand and then promptly announced her retirement from the game. Gregorius achieved the milestone during New Zealand's penalty shootout win over Belgium at the Algarve Cup in Portugal this morning. Coach Tom Semani says it was a fitting way for her to go out.
Gregorius finished the last game with her last kick scoring a goal. Doesn't get any better than that. So it was a great send-off for her, and a perfect way to finish her career.
Tom Sumani. The New Zealand squash player Paul Cole has come up just short of a significant triumph on the PSA World Tour. The world number 5 has given up a 2-game lead to lose a 5-game final to second-ranked Ali Farag of Egypt at the Windy City Open in Chicago. Cole had beaten the world number 1 and number 4 en route to the final, but was not quite able to finish the job in the title decider. That's the news.
COVID-19 continues to spread in New Zealand.
We got a report of a positive test last evening and we're just getting all the information together on that.
While the economy takes a hammering.
This is now spreading around the globe. We can see that. That means from an economic perspective, we're talking about effects right across the year.
But some industries remain optimistic.
There's been some very, very good sale prices and that has met customers' needs and people are definitely booking.
We're not going anywhere. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly in the east and in the north for Auckland. Waikato to Taranaki, including central high country and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine, a few cloudy periods. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and a few showers. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, also Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Low cloud about inland valleys early tomorrow morning, then high cloud developing. For Fiordland, fine today, becoming cloudy with the odd coastal shower tomorrow. And at the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and 1 or 2 showers. RNZ National. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The country's newest case of coronavirus is the first to be caught and transmitted in New Zealand that health officials know of. A man in his 40s is the first known to have contracted the disease without having travelled to another country that has the virus. Instead, he caught it from a family member who had returned from Iran 2 weekends ago. That person is a probable fourth case. Our health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
New Zealand's other confirmed cases have been in people who have visited the known hotspots of Iran and northern Italy. But the latest man got the disease at his home in Auckland. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says that's a first.
I would classify this as a case of family transmission and local transmission. There is what appears to be a very clear link between travel to Iran recently by family members and this man who lives in the same household.
Mr Bloomfield says the case is not connected to New Zealand's first confirmed case, a woman who travelled from Iran. He says 2 older relatives of the latest man who lived with him had returned from Iran on a flight from Doha on February the 23rd. One of them became sick after he got home.
Now, 3 other members of the man's family had previously been unwell with mild illnesses. None seriously. They are now fully recovered and are with him in self-isolation. The man's partner has currently got a very mild illness, and so a swab has been taken to test as well for COVID-19.
Mr Bloomfield says there's now a widespread tracing operation underway to find anyone the sick family members have been in contact with. The family member who first spread the disease is a probable 4th case for the country. Mr Bloomfield initially said he would not be tested because he was already better, but the Health Minister David Clark said later that plan had changed.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's highly likely that because they're asymptomatic, that they will test negative for the virus. It's a belts and braces approach, but I'm pleased to hear that person has accepted testing.
David Clark says he hopes the test will give people some comfort. Grandchildren of the man who carried the virus go to Auckland Grammar and Ormiston Junior schools. The Ministry of Health says the children are in isolation but have no symptoms, so won't have spread the disease. These Ormiston parents were staying vigilant.
Mixed emotions. Probably at first I was worried, but having the information from the school really eased a bit of that anxiety and doubt and a bit of fear.
Yeah, actually I am worried about my niece, and I would suggest that she does stay at home and do not attend school for like another week or 2 until this thing is all settled.
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem that there's anything to worry about at our schools here, but we're just keeping an eye out. I know the schools are doing everything they can to keep everything under wraps.
Ashley Bloomfield says public health staff are still tracing anyone who's been in close contact with the second confirmed case, the Auckland woman who'd been to northern Italy and then taken flights between Auckland and Palmerston North when she was unwell. He says everyone who was in close contact with her on her flights is now in self-isolation. Dr Bloomfield won't release the name of the 2 Auckland medical centres the woman visited or the one the latest affected family went to, saying he wants people to feel safe to go to their GP. But he did hit out at keyboard warriors, who he said had been bullying the woman online and speculating about her case.
Patient number 2, I just want to clarify, had rung Healthline, and also the first contact she had with the medical centre, she rang her own GP before going in. So I just want to make that clear.
A public health expert, Professor Michael Baker, has warned community transmission in New Zealand could be happening. That's between people with no direct connection to someone who's been in a COVID-19 hotspot.
The term that's used quite a bit is silent transmission, and that is because this is a mild illness for most people, probably maybe up to 80%. And so they can have just what looks like a common cold, they can infect other people, or the transmission doesn't become obvious until someone is infected and gets quite ill and then presents to the health system.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says basic hygiene is critical in the circumstances.
And the most important thing people can do is if they're sick, stay home. If they cough or sneeze, cough and sneeze into your elbow, wash your hands. The same things we advocate every flu season are as important now as before.
Ashley Bloomfield says the latest case is not classified as community transmission because there's a family link to someone who's come from overseas. But he says it is local transmission, and that's why tracing all those who could be infected is crucial. For Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Meanwhile, an Auckland school caught up in the fallout from the coronavirus outbreak is adamant it's business as usual, despite one of its students being in isolation. Auckland Grammar was notified at 12:30 today by the Ministries of Health and Education that one of its pupils has a parent at home who has tested positive for COVID-19. They say the student does not have any symptoms and is not infectious. 3 other Auckland schools are in the same situation, including Westlake Boys High School, which has hired a specialist company to deep clean the whole school this weekend. In a letter to parents today, Westlake Boys High School says it won't be holding full assemblies until further notice, and boys can wear face masks to school if they choose. But that's not the case at Auckland Grammar. Headmaster Tim O'Connor says it's business as usual.
What we've done is simply contact the school, pass on the letter from Auckland Regional Public Health Services, and told them that there is no risk, that we're carrying on business as usual, and I think we should be just carrying on with good hygienic practices.
So, Tim, did they give you a letter to distribute to parents, a sort of template?
It's just a prescribed letter from Public Health that all we were asked to do was to disseminate the information. It's a simple PDF, and we disseminated it.
Is it your understanding that they've given the exact same information to the other schools who have also had notifications?
Yes, so exactly the same sort of scenario at Westlake Boys, Westlake Girls, we were told, and Almaston Junior College got the same information.
Have you had contact with any of those other schools?
With Westlake Boys, with the headmaster there, yes.
And what was that conversation about?
Well, just joining the club, really, and that simply that what is the process that they followed, checking that it aligned with our processes, and they actually aligned spot on. So I think our schools have very good pandemic processes in place. We're well supported by the Ministry of Education and Public Health, and it's just a process.
So we know that Westlake Boys is undertaking a deep clean of the school. Are you doing the same?
No. Our case, I don't know all of the details with Westlake Boys, but the primary message that I would get out to parents and to boys, given it's the end of the school day, is that there has been no exposure to COVID-19 at our school from the student or from their parent. and the student who attends Auckland Grammar School has not been infectious at any point in time. So there's absolutely no reason for us to do a deep clean or anything of that nature.
Is that student at school?
No, he's now in isolation at home.
So,
at the request of public health.
So what about allowing kids to wear face masks? Are you doing that at your school? Because I know some schools are.
No. In my mind, that just creates hysteria. I think we've seen what happens. Public health have already told us that there is really little or no point wearing a face mask to stop getting the virus. That the only reason you would wear a face mask is if you potentially had it and you were stopping the spread of it. And then it's up to how you wear the face mask. In my mind, wearing a face mask at school is simply going to create panic amongst the student body and is entirely unnecessary.
What about assemblies? Are you carrying on with school assemblies?
Oh, too right. They're the most inspirational part of the day.
Because some schools are not, as a consequence of this.
Oh, no, we are. Yeah. No, well, assembly is key to our day. And I might say it flippantly, but it is a key part of who we are as a school. As I say, we're business as usual because there isn't a student who is infectious, and we need to be moving in normal fashion and normal processes.
Are you expecting some degree of absenteeism while people get their heads around this?
Look, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think we already see a little bit of hysteria messaging and social media platforms because people just simply aren't reading the message that's been given to them. And I, again, just urge people to carry on business as usual. There is no reason to stay at home. You should attend school as normal, and unless you're unwell. And if you're unwell, then you should stay at home until you are better. And that's, I think, a social responsibility so that illnesses and viruses are not being spread.
You're surrounded by young men, teenagers. What are you telling them about washing their hands?
Well, I am talking to them daily in assembly. That's one of the beauties of assembly. I was able to talk to them this morning about the issue at Westlake Boys, and again, I just reiterated to them to try on a regular basis to be washing their hands for 20 seconds. If they're coughing or sneezing, to do so into their elbow. And those sort of practices are socially responsible, and we care for each other. And I think we've seen that the greatest risk from COVID-19 is to the elderly or those who are ill. And as such, as a group of young men, they should be taking that responsibility really seriously. If they can't look after themselves, that they do it for their elders.
So, not saying your staff are elderly, Tim, but they are at higher risk than teenagers. So, how are they in all of this?
Well, we've followed the same process that we have with parents. And look, this has been relatively quick moving, as I said, from 12:30 today. So our primary, the first email that went was to parents, followed up by a text message, so it prompted them. And the second email went immediately to all staff, followed up with some instructions, and was followed up with a text message. So again, that everyone was able to pick up the message rather than to be hearing it via the media. The feedback from our staff is that they understand that the messaging from public health is that we're all safe. So it's business as usual.
And that is Tim O'Connor, the headmaster at Auckland Grammar. The Director of Public Health today refused to name the clinics visited by a North Shore mother who later tested positive for coronavirus. But one of those clinics, revealed after the Ministry's press conference, says it followed public health protocols. The mother, who is now at home in isolation, flew home from Italy via Singapore last week. She felt unwell on Monday and flew returned to Palmerston North that day on Air New Zealand. The woman visited 2 medical clinics that day. A doctor at the first unnamed clinic gave her antibiotics. A doctor at the second, which has been named as the Westgate Medical Centre, took swabs, and those test results yesterday proved to be positive. A staff member at that clinic has spoken to the New Zealand Herald today, saying they were concerned the woman's visit put other patients and staff members at the clinic at the time at risk. Westgate Medical Centre is affiliated to Tamaki Health. Its services are contracted to ProCare. We'll speak to its clinical director, Alan Moffat, after 6 tonight, but in a statement from Tamaki Health, its CEO, Stefan Crawsor, says we follow public health protocols for managing the care of suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19. We have signs on the door asking people not to enter if they have been overseas within the last 2 weeks. They should phone ahead of any visit. We confirm a woman who suspected she had COVID-19 attended our medical clinic late on Monday afternoon, 2nd of March. She presented as a walk-in to urgent care and was seen in a short period of time. Once the patient identified herself as having returned from overseas and was showing COVID-19 symptoms, all clinic staff followed Auckland Regional Public Health Service protocols. Mr. Crawsor says the doctor who treated the woman has taken leave and will remain at home until March 16. He says no other staff were in close contact with the woman and they remain at work. Meanwhile, our reporter Katie Doyle went to the Westgate shopping centre to find out what locals think about the situation.
You get to my age, you don't really worry too much, you know what I mean? It's either going to happen or it's not. What do we do? Hey, most people have got to go to work, got families to look after. We can't just all hunker down, can we?
How does it make you feel knowing that, someone may have been around here with coronavirus?
Oh, it's really worrying, really concerning, yes. Yeah, I wish they'd have told us sooner what had happened, because apparently they didn't tell the nursing staff either. So, no, it's very concerning. We've actually just cancelled our trip to Japan because we're actually booked on the Diamond Princess. So, it ended up getting cancelled before we cancelled it. So, yeah.
It's gone mad around the world. Clearing out supermarkets is ridiculous because the world's not going to end because there's a flu. The Asian flu, I had the Asian flu in 1957 in the UK, and I think about 40,000 people died there. 1 million people died around the world. At the moment, there's a German measles epidemic in the UK, but nobody talks about that. So, no, people are getting carried away.
Would you, knowing now that there is one locally, would it stop you from coming out?
No. No, we'd still come out.
I don't think it's too much to worry about at the moment. I think they should be putting more controls on the border to stop more people from these countries coming in, like Italy and Iran and places like that, and China, where it's really quite bad. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel scared for myself and my family. It's pretty scary because you don't know who has it. Yeah.
Would it stop you coming to a place like this?
It would actually. So yeah, it would stop me going to places. I fear for myself and all, and my health and all. So yeah, it would stop me from going to places.
I'm just still going where I'm going, but I know, like in places like in the bars, in pokies, in the buses, where it's a close knit. Also the hospitals. It's a lot of places. It just depends. Look, if I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. There's nothing I can do. It's the same as that. If I'm going to die today, I don't know I'll die today.
And that was Katie Doyle speaking to Westgate locals. Meanwhile, in Australia, where there are now 50 cases of coronavirus, including a baby, the government has expanded its travel ban to include South Korea. Australians are now banned from travelling to China, Iran and South Korea, with nationals arriving from any of those countries required to spend 14 days in quarantine. This afternoon, Prime Minister Scott Morrison also announced travellers from Italy will be subject to more rigorous screenings before being allowed to enter the country. Travellers arriving from Italy will be asked mandatory questions and will not be able to use smart gates. They will also be required to undergo health screening at the airport, which involves temperature and associated checks. Biosecurity officials will meet all unwell passengers off planes. It is 25 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Love to hear from you around the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak. What are your thoughts? Are you concerned? Are you taking any particular steps? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The opposition has savaged the Health Minister over his coronavirus response, questioning his competency and calling him out of his depth. It comes after a communications muddle this morning where David Clark announced the third positive case of COVID-19 with very little detail. National says it caused unnecessary concern and the government's now changed its communication plan. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, pulled together this report.
Health Minister, he's been busy. David Clark, he joins us now. David, g'day, good morning.
Good morning, Duncan.
The Health Minister appearing on News Hub's AM show this morning and dropping a surprise development.
Just wanted to say up front, Duncan, you'll know we had a second confirmed case overnight. Yesterday announced. Overnight we have had a further confirmed case. That's news to hand.
At the same time, on RNZ's Morning Report, the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, was fronting but did not offer the information unprompted.
Out for symptoms.
Dr. Bloomfield, I'm just hearing reports that a third case of coronavirus has been confirmed. Are you able to tell us about that?
Yeah, actually, we got a report of a positive test last evening, and we're just getting all the information together on that and planning to do a stand-up later this afternoon, just to once we've got all the information together. So we'll be everybody at the same time.
Well, I think we are effectively hearing it now. So.
It's not the first comms misfire. The second case here was made public not by New Zealand authorities, but the World Health Organization. The opposition leader, Simon Bridges, says the communication's been sloppy and has caused confusion.
It shows a less than competent or assured approach from certainly the Minister of Health. I think the government as well. I think overall we're seeing this is more serious than the government seems to be getting.
The government's rejecting that.
I think we've been moving as quickly as we can in this situation, and I feel like we have communicated as quickly as we can with the public, and that's the most important thing.
The most important thing for us to do is, of course, first contact the person whose results have been found to be positive. The second most important step is then contact tracing for their friends, families or anyone they may have been in contact with if they haven't been in self-isolation. We prioritise that and then the information goes out more publicly.
The morning's muddle has prompted a new communications plan. In future, all new cases will be announced by the Ministry at its daily update every afternoon. Atu iti whare parimata, mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
Meanwhile, National MP David Bennett is facing heavy criticism for saying people should be panic buying in the face of the coronavirus. The Hamilton East MP told a local radio station people should be concerned about the government's response and should prepare for an outbreak by stockpiling. He's been labelled irresponsible, drongoistic and even a clown. Political reporter Yvette McCulloch has more.
And so they should be, you should be out there panic buying.
Hamilton East MP David Bennett encouraging people to prepare for COVID-19 by panic buying. Mr Bennett told Free FM radio on Monday that the government had dropped the ball on the coronavirus and people should be concerned.
You're in government and you're in Parliament, your job is probably to ease people's fears and that, but I don't believe in this case you should. Right. Reality is you should stock up on food.
Fair enough.
And, you look at China, you look at those cities that have been in lockdown, there's nobody on the streets, their schools are shut, everybody's just at home.
His comments followed scenes in supermarkets in Auckland over the weekend of snaking queues and empty shelves as people began stockpiling. Infectious disease expert Susie Wiles says Mr Bennett's comments were immensely irresponsible. She says there are very real consequences to senseless panic buying.
I had a conversation yesterday with a lady who is immunocompromised and often uses hand sanitizer when she's out and about, and she can't get any anymore. And so my real concern, this is why I was urging people not to panic buy, is that people often buy the wrong things or they buy them when they don't, what they don't need. And that means that people who do need them are left out.
Dr Wiles says she's been seeing red over the opposition's response to the coronavirus. She says a public health emergency is not a time to be eroding confidence.
If they do have concerns about how the government are, or health officials are handling this, then to do that in private rather than undermine them, because the last thing we need are the New Zealand public panicking and doing all the wrong things because they hear the government response or the health officials' response being criticised constantly.
But National leader Simon Bridges rejects this, saying his party is doing what a responsible opposition does.
We have a real role here, and I'm not calling for panic. I'm not suggesting that everything will at every point be perfect, but I do think that the response health-wise has been less than competent and assured.
MPs from all other parties gave National a serve, accusing them of irresponsible politicising.
Nobody here pays any regard to his drongoistic behaviour, so why should they out in the constituency worry about what he says?
Look, if I was David Bennett, I'd be panicking all the time. I think that we need to be prepared but not overreact.
I think that's not a sensible or responsible approach.
It is incumbent upon politicians right across the House to, have a duty of care towards the people that we represent.
And Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters took another dig during question time.
It would be laughable what Mr Bennett said, but the reality is that nobody in this country thinks such clowns should be in the next government.
Mr Bennett's party colleagues also weren't endorsing his point of view.
People will naturally be stocking up on supplies, but I think the importance of keeping calm, so probably the word panic is not helpful.
No, I don't think we're in that situation at the moment.
You've got enough toilet paper? So you haven't panicked or anything?
No, I haven't.
And what about you, Mr Woodhouse?
No, not at all. And I do the shopping in our household, so I'll be shopping at the weekend, but it'll be business as usual.
In a statement, David Bennett acknowledged he did say New Zealanders should be out there panic buying. However, he says in hindsight, he's realised this was not helpful. Mr Bennett says all New Zealanders should be following advice from public health officials. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Doctors are pleading with people who suspect they may have coronavirus to stay home and seek help over the phone rather than visiting medical centres. An Auckland woman who has COVID-19 and tested positive for the disease on Tuesday night after getting a swab from her GP. She had walked into the clinic and did not call ahead. Doctors say they will have to close entire clinics if people infect them or their staff, and rural doctors are preparing to treat people in their cars to limit any possible spread of the illness. Nita Blake-Person reports.
For people trying to contact their doctor to talk about coronavirus, the message is clear.
Welcome to City Doctors. If you're calling about coronavirus, please phone the dedicated Healthline 0800 number. Please do not come to the clinic if you're worried you've been exposed to coronavirus.
Healthline staff took 2,200 calls just yesterday about coronavirus. The phones are being answered 24/7, although some people are not heeding that advice. That includes an Auckland woman who visited 2 GP clinics and went on to take domestic flights to and from Palmerston North before her case was confirmed. She had not called the medical centre ahead of her visit. Kate Baddock is the chair of the Medical Association. She says the woman who has coronavirus did pretty much everything wrong in getting treatment.
We all need to be very, very thoughtful about where we've been, who we've been in contact with, what symptoms we have, and not just turn up to medical centres.
Dr. Baddock says the risk to medical staff as well as other patients is huge.
If a practice gets contaminated, because somebody comes in with coronavirus and precautions are not taken because they are at risk and haven't identified themselves as at risk to the practice, then there is a risk that every single person that they've been in touch with then may need to stand down for 2 weeks. I mean, a practice just has to close down. And that's an incredibly costly thing to have to do in terms of healthcare.
And that risk is even higher in rural areas where the limited workforce and smaller practices are often dealing with tourists who have travelled through different countries. Dr. Fiona Bolden is the chair of the Rural General Practice Network. She says staff will be treating people in their cars when necessary.
We try and triage people before they come in the door. We really don't want them coming into the practice and contaminating other people. And so we will do, as we had to do actually during the measles outbreak, try and see people in their cars and examine them there and make some sort of clinical decision on them from there.
Rebecca Doran is a GP in Hamilton and says her practice is looking at bringing in virtual consults, and the current situation has highlighted how important they are.
For a start, patients don't have to come into the practice if they're not feeling particularly well. Some patients, if they're very unwell, may still need to come in because we need to actually assess them. So we have the ability to take their temperature, to take their oxygen levels. They can't do things like that at home. But on a virtual Skype-type consult, you can get visual feedback of how fast the patient's breathing, whether they're beginning to look unwell, which sometimes you don't necessarily get so much on a phone call.
The medical director of the Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners, Dr Brian Betty, says while he understands the general concern about coronavirus, it is important to keep things in perspective.
80 to 90% of people who overseas get coronavirus get better. They recover. They get a mild to moderate cold flu-type illness. A lot of people get very few symptoms at all, and they, on the whole, do get better. So, although people are anxious, they need to be reassured by that fact.
For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And in breaking news, the Corrections Department has put out a statement, and it reads, Corrections can confirm that a prisoner at Auckland Prison has died following an alleged prisoner-on-prisoner assault this afternoon. Police are at the prison and are investigating. The alleged assault occurred in the unit's yard. Staff responded to stop the assault and provide medical assistance to the victim. The alleged perpetrator has been placed on directed segregation in the prison's management unit. Corrections will also carry out a full investigation and will ensure all evidence, including CCTV footage, is provided to the police. That is from the Corrections Department. A prisoner has died at Auckland Prison. That's Auckland Prison at Poremoremo, and police are investigating. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the dire outlook for Pacific economies as the COVID-19 outbreak sinks in. Allegations that immigrant grandparents are unfairly being kept apart from their grandkids. And it's game over for football Fern striker Sarah Gregarious, who's calling it a day after 100 matches. Do get in contact about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know, do you have confidence in the way the government is responding to COVID-19? Or do the opposition have a point when they raise doubts about how it's being handled? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now with Susanna.
An Auckland man in his 40s is the third person confirmed to have the coronavirus in New Zealand. It appears to be the first instance of the virus being caught and transmitted here. Authorities believe the man caught COVID-19 from a family member who had returned from Iran almost 2 weeks ago and is a probable fourth case. Te Wānanga o Aotearoa says one of its students is in self-isolation after being in contact with the second confirmed person with the disease. A student from the Palmerston North campus had been in close contact with her on Monday before attending a class. All students who were in the building at the time have been notified but are not considered at risk. The Minister of Police has confirmed the Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement has been investigated by the police watchdog. Mr Clement has been widely tipped to replace the Police Commissioner Mike Bush when he steps down next month. A spokesperson says the report will not be made public. A police officer has described waking up in pain as she was raped by a colleague in Northland last year. The evidence was heard in the man's trial in the Auckland District Court today. He has pleaded not guilty to charges of sexual violation and indecent assault. The family of a man who died while in care of the Waikato DHB Mental Health Unit says the Ombudsman's report into conditions at the centre are just the tip of the iceberg. The report outlined overcrowding and the use of seclusion and physical restraints after unannounced inspections last September. The controversial ticket resale site Viagogo has backed down in a long-running legal fight with New Zealand's consumer watchdog 1 day before its court hearing. The Commerce Commission will no longer seek an interim injunction against the Swiss-based company after it removed misleading claims from its website, but its main case continues. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Now, to tell us a little bit more about that story involving Viagogo, Nona Peltier from Business News has joined me in the studio. So can we say it's somewhat settled,
It's
Nona?
somewhat settled because there's a substantive case yet to come, and that's going to happen in August. So there are still a number of issues to be addressed. The Commission received some 950 complaints about this particular operator that sold
Explain
events.
to us what they do again.
Yeah, so what they do is an online, I guess, seller of tickets, and potentially a reseller. So people will go along to the site and buy tickets they think are premium tickets, and they're going to be just as honored and so on, which they found out were not guaranteed necessarily, and there were all sorts of fishhooks with it, and they didn't get what they thought they were going to get, and therefore they made these complaints. And the case is before the courts, but at least the interim injunction that the Commerce Commission had been pursuing has been put off for now. And that's because the company, which is Swiss-based, Viagogo is the name of the organization, agreed to recognize the jurisdiction of the New Zealand court in this case, which is one of the things that was at issue, and to promise to make good on the changes that they made on the website and make no further changes, as well as to change other misrepresentations or other representations, because of course the case is still before the courts, that would potentially mislead customers about what's available. The Commerce Commission took an extra step in saying that they were concerned by suggesting that when people do Google or whatever they're going to use, search engine, to look for tickets, that they be careful about where they buy them from, and to scroll down to a recognized, reputable seller that's one that has a name that they would associate with ticket sales rather than Viagogo necessarily. So the Commerce Commission is still very concerned, is still warning customers about the potential risks, but for now they've called a truce.
Okay. Right. With COVID-19, there's a lot of advice going around, especially for businesses. And this time, some is coming in relation to the banks. What is it?
Yeah. So yesterday, the Kiwi Bank said that they would be happy for customers, businesses, to contact them before they run into trouble to see how they can help. Today, the Prime Minister went further and said the banks should actually be reaching out to the businesses, telling them how they can help, and to give the businesses some confidence that there is help out there, so they just can then respond to what the banks have to offer.
So proactively contact your customers.
Yeah. So they're saying to the banks, it's on you. You go out there and you tell your business customers what you can do to help them, rather than leave it for businesses to scramble around and find out what that might be. So that's interesting, yeah. There's a lot going on right now with the COVID-19, and we've heard so much about it. I'm sure that that's not the end of it either.
No. So what were the markets doing today?
Actually, quite a good day on the markets. We had the fourth positive session in a row. And that's in line with Asia as well. So Asia's done well. We're doing well too. Our market rose nearly 2%. That's where it ended the day, up 223 points to 11,641. And the Australian market was also better, up 1%. Asian markets also up. And really following on from a very strong bounce in the U.S. markets.
Were there any particular drivers in that, the gains?
Yes, there were. So I think what it was basically that there's been, of course, in the middle of all of this, there's a U.S. election coming up. Of course. And there was some concern about who might be the Democratic Party's nominee.
The Joe Biden factor.
The Joe Biden, what do they call it?
The Joe Biden factor, I was just saying. So yes. The fact that he potentially is pulling away from Bernie Sanders, and the market likes that better.
Yeah, more moderate. And of course, Bloomberg threw support behind him, as did two other leading candidates. And so now it's really I shouldn't say that because there is three people in the race. But however, Biden is on top at the moment, and the market loved that, and it went wild. I mean, you would have to say that. It surged 4.5%. That's the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The S&P 500 gained 4.22%. The NASDAQ 3.85%. Those are big numbers on a market that's already been at the top for a while. So volatility, I'd say that's likely to continue because there's so many things going on in the world right now. And let's not forget that while, China is struggling. The COVID-19 virus is spreading. And New Zealand at the moment, we're right at our peak harvest. So there's a lot of issues coming down the line there in terms of supply, storage, and so on. We're going to have a lot more on that coming up tomorrow. And yes, keep paying attention to what we have to say about this subject.
Exactly. Do you going to give me the dollar?
I will indeed. Dollar is trading at 63 US cents, so it's quite strong there compared to where it has been.
Yep.
95.1 Australian and 48.9 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news. A female police officer has described waking up in pain as her colleague raped her in a Northland motel. The woman's DVD police interview was played to the jury in her male colleague's trial in the Auckland District Court today. The man, who can't be named, has pleaded not guilty to one charge of sexual violation and another of indecent assault. Our court reporter Annika Smith filed this report, and just a warning, it contains details which some may find distressing.
The accused and his alleged victim were part of a group of officers put up in a Kirikiri motel in February 2019 to work during Waitangi commemorations. The court has heard the officers socialised at the motel that night, playing drinking games with a hollowed-out police baton and trying to buy fast food by walking through a McDonald's drive-through. In a DVD police interview played to the jury today, the woman said she socialised with the others, including the man, that night. She said she was fetching another beer from the defendant's motel unit when he beckoned her into a room and closed the door. She said the man tried to come onto her, groping her, but she denied him and returned to the group composed. These are her words, but not her voice.
I guess as a female, you're away a lot with the boys as well. We all have banter. We all muck around and have a good time together. So I don't know. For me, I just got on with it. I didn't go out and make a scene or make an issue. I just told him to pull his head in. He'd obviously been drinking and kind of left it at that.
The woman said she went to bed alone in the early hours of the morning before waking up to the man penetrating her.
I don't know how long it took me to come around, but I just remember feeling the pain and feeling forced.
The woman grew visibly upset in the video as she described what happened. She said she felt manipulated and pressured not to seek out her superiors.
I was really upset. I was almost hysterical crying, and he kept on saying things to me like, "What are you doing? I've got a wife and kids. Don't do this to me."
The woman said she drank about 10 beers throughout the night, but was aware of what was going on. She said the man eventually left her room and his friend later showed up before getting a superior officer. It's the Crown's case the man raped her as she slept, while his defence say she wasn't asleep and any sexual activity was consensual. Yesterday, the man's defence lawyer, Paul Borich QC, told the jury the woman's door had been left unlocked that night because the meeting was a pre-arranged hookup. 2 Snapchat messages the man sent the complainant before the alleged assault were never read because he deleted the application. The trial before Judge Thomas and a jury is set down for 2 weeks. At the Auckland District Court, this is Annika Smith.
It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Families fighting to have overseas grandparents visit their newborn grandchildren say unfair health restrictions are keeping them apart. It's led one couple to take their baby to India to be looked after by her grandmother. And another woman says Immigration New Zealand's decision to reject her mother's visitor visa left her with no support at a traumatic time. Our immigration reporter Jill Bonnet has more.
Rotorua dentist Rupinder Kaur and her husband Pretender Singh, who manages the St John ambulance service in Lakes District, are in India with their 7-week-old baby Rabab. They're returning to New Zealand shortly and leaving her with Mr Singh's mother, Manjeet Kaur Gill. Her parent category resident visa was rejected because she has multiple myeloma. Mr Singh says the retired registered nurse has enough medication to manage her condition, which is in remission and isn't infectious. But they've since also been turned down for a visitor visa.
They run a free clinic at home, back home in India, and she treats patients as well. So she's doing pretty much everything normally.
Mr Singh says they provided medication receipts to prove she wouldn't be using the New Zealand health system. He says as his mother worked for the government, she has all her healthcare costs reimbursed. So it makes no sense that she would try to get medication paid for here instead.
Does that mean that she cannot even visit her family ever again? Because once you've got the condition, you've got the condition.
He says as he works 12-hour shifts at St John, the couple hasn't been able to get a nanny to cover times they were both at work when his wife returns to her dental practice next month. They hope Rabab and her grandmother will now come to New Zealand in the winter, but no, there is no certainty about that. Visitors applying for temporary visas don't routinely have medical tests, but their results remain on immigration files if they've had abnormal results when they apply for other types of visa. Tanya Sabnani ran into the same problem. She says she planned to get her mother a grandparent visa, but an ECG showed up an abnormal result. After having an angioplasty procedure, her mother was given the all clear to travel, but was again rejected, this time for a visitor visa. Ms Sabnani says she went into deep depression after the birth of her son Yuan in November, who was then admitted to hospital for 10 days after Christmas with Kawasaki disease.
Not having any final hair just literally broke us. It was supposed to be most exciting time of our lives, but it's just been so stressful.
Ms Sabnani, who works at a fertility clinic as a geneticist, says they've provided financial sponsorship and her parents have medical insurance. She's now considering taking a long holiday to India with Yuan.
I don't really want to go because that means that my baby is away from the daddy for a little bit and dad can't take a lot of leave. And when you consider New Zealand as home, you just feel, is it really my home where my parents can't come and visit me?
Immigration New Zealand says all visitors must have an acceptable standard of health, and their ability to pay for medical services or medication has no bearing on whether they're likely to impose significant costs on the public health service. For Checkpoint, Jill Bonnet.
Let's go to the US now, and the Democratic presidential contest is turning into a two-horse race between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Mr Biden scored a sweep of wins on Super Tuesday yesterday, narrowly defeating his rival in Texas, while Mr Sanders took the biggest prize of the night, California. But the former vice president notched up another win today. Michael Bloomberg bowed out, endorsing Mr Biden on his way and promising to help him in any way. That likely means Mr Bloomberg's bottomless pit of money could be headed towards the Biden campaign at precisely the right time. CNN's Jeff Zeleny reports on the state of play.
They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing.
Tonight, it's clear. Momentum trumped money.
So I'm here to report we are very much alive.
Joe Biden is not only alive, he's on a remarkable roll, collecting the endorsement of Michael Bloomberg, who extinguished his presidential bid after a dismal showing on Super Tuesday.
Defeating Donald Trump starts with uniting behind the candidate with the best shot to do it. And after yesterday's vote, it is clear that candidate is my friend and a great American, Joe Biden.
Biden sweeping 10 states, from Massachusetts to Minnesota, across the South, and even winning Texas. Bernie Sanders claiming his home state of Vermont and 2 others, while holding a lead in the biggest prize of all, California. Tonight, Biden is leading Sanders in the only metric that matters, the delegate race. Biden at 435, Sanders 381, Elizabeth Warren far behind at 26, with 1,991 delegates needed to win the nomination. As Warren reassesses her candidacy, an advisor telling CNN the biggest decision left is whether to endorse Biden, Sanders, or neither. For Sanders, the results on Tuesday were a surprising setback, exposing holes in his coalition and raising questions about whether his support has come up against a ceiling.
Of course I'm disappointed. I would like to win every state by a landslide. It's not going to happen.
He pledged to fight Biden all the way to the Democratic convention in Milwaukee.
Joe and I have a very different voting record. Joe and I have a very different vision for the future of this country, and Joe and I are running very different campaigns.
Yet Sanders is trying to embrace former President Barack Obama through a new TV ad, aimed in part at improving his low support among black voters. It was a dramatic comeback for Biden, for which he owes a long list of thank yous. To Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg for dropping out and endorsing him, to Warren for bringing Bloomberg down to size on the debate stage, and to voters who flocked to him.
People are talking about a revolution. We started a movement. We've increased turnout. And the turnout turned out for us.
Going forward in a one-on-one race with Sanders, the former vice president can also lean on the financial muscle of Bloomberg, who pledged to turn his robust campaign into an effort to take down President Trump.
I will not walk away from the most important political fight of my life, and I hope you won't walk away either.
Now, Bloomberg is vowing to spend unlimited amounts of money in the effort of trying to help Joe Biden, but also to defeat President Trump. We should point out it is Trump who is at the center of all of this. For months, Democrats have been searching for a consensus candidate, one of the strongest candidates to go up against the president. Well, many of them have found that candidate in Joe Biden, but we should point out there is still one question mark. Elizabeth Warren, what will she decide to do? She spent the day behind closed doors assessing or reassessing her candidacy. But if she decides to endorse Sanders or Biden or perhaps stay out of it, that will certainly be interesting as this race goes forward. But go forward it will. This is a delegate fight now. Bernie Sanders already heading out on the campaign trail tomorrow. Another round of primaries next Tuesday.
Jeff Zeleny with that report. Netball fans can watch the world champions playing in 14 different centres around the country when the ANZ Premiership returns this month. 5 out of the 6 teams in New Zealand's domestic netball competition have silver ferns in their sides, and with a lot of player movement in the off-season, along with imports from Trinidad and Tobago, it may not be the usual suspects taking the title in 2020. Felicity Reid was at today's Premiership launch in Auckland.
Silver Fern Katrina Rory has played more domestic netball than any other player in the ANZ Premiership. The Pulse captain starts the season on 188 games played across the various incarnations of the tournament. At 32, Rory is the oldest player in the competition, and just how much longer she'll make herself available for international netball is yet to be determined. As the new season approaches, the world champion took time to reflect on why she keeps coming back to the Pulse.
We were just sitting down and watching the videos of past ANZ Premiership seasons and realising how much you love it, how much joy you get from it when you see those photos, those videos. You get that feeling of just a sense of accomplishment and love for the game, and I think that's what keeps, especially me, coming back for more.
2019 was third time lucky for the Pulse as they finally won the title. But Rory says the 5 other teams will be trying to keep them out of the final in what she thinks will be a physical contest.
In the pre-season, you saw that it was just a fierce the whole time. There's lots of body on body. People are contesting hard and wanting to contest hard with each other. Everyone wants to win and pretty much doing anything they can to win, which I think is making the game a great spectacle.
New mum Grace Curra admits she isn't a good watcher of netball, but she did see plenty she liked as the Northern Stars made the final last season. Cara is back on court for the Stars in 2020 after missing last season to have her son. She will lead the team again and hopes to build on the team's first appearance in the grand final.
Obviously the girls making the grand final, and I watched all those games leading up to it. It was really exciting, and I know that that's put us in good stead for this year, but I know that we also need to do the hard work, which we have pre-season wise, and we can't rely on that result to get us there again.
Once a powerhouse of New Zealand netball, the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic have not had the same success since the competition changed in 2017. For captain Sam Winder's niece Sinclair, there is value in remembering the good times.
Previously, the Magic was the only side to never miss out on the finals series. So, we have that history behind us, and that's something we've actually gone back to quite a bit this year. Our roots, who we are, where we come from, who we represent, what sort of game we want to play, and thinking more about us rather than like the opposition or tactics for this team or to play against. It's been really nice to just focus on what we're doing and build on the strengths of individuals in our team and finding a way to make those strengths really cohesive so that as a unit we're really strong.
Winders has anchored the Silver Ferns mid-court, and she expects to see a similar style to her own when the ANZ Premiership starts.
There's a big focus on the powerful, explosive game, and I think we'll see that in a lot of players. So it's being able to switch on to do something really powerful and then cruise when you need to, but be explosive when it counts. So I think that sort of gameplay is something that's quite specific to New Zealand in some ways, because it's the kind of people that we build, like really powerful, explosive people, and it's in our roots.
Now that she is based back in New Zealand, Silver Ferns coach Dame Nolene Toroa will be a very interested spectator this season, And she says more needs to be done to keep fans engaged in the competition.
I feel that the events is an area that can be improved in regards to entertainment factor, what happens prior to game and what's happening when people are sitting on these seats. So, we've got to look at our game in the entirety if we want to attract people to not only watch the game but also play it.
The ANZ Premiership is played Sundays and Mondays from March 15 until mid-July. For Checkpoint, Felicity Reid.
And time now for some of your feedback before the news at 6. A lot of it is on coronavirus. This person says we have topped up our normal emergency supplies and bought some extra groceries. Someone else says, I'm concerned about the slow communication from the Health Ministry and the lack of details related to COVID-19 in New Zealand. Their comms make me worry more. Another person says, we have not been able to buy hand sanitiser in Palmerston North for well over a week now. Is there anything being done about this at government level? Someone else says, interesting that the Australian Prime Minister has banned travellers from China, South Korea and Iran, but travellers from Italy are just subject to more intense border scrutiny. Racist much, they say. Mary from Hamilton says that David Bennett is exactly right. We are gravely underestimating the patterns already observed in other countries. I have read the Wuhan report and have stockpiled everything and am prepared for a shutdown nationwide by May. Ian says, coronavirus, wouldn't it be better to wear gloves rather than face masks since our health is in our own hands? And someone else says they don't believe it's helpful to turn the coronavirus into a political poll as to its effectiveness of how it's being handled. It encourages the uninformed and to no advantage.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. The country's newest case of COVID-19 appears to be the first caught and transmitted here. A man in his 40s contracted the disease without having travelled to a country that has the virus. He caught it from an older family member who had returned from Iran almost 2 weeks ago. Public health experts have been warning community transmission could be happening here, but the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says this particular case isn't in that category because there is a family link to someone who's come from overseas.
Community transmission is where you would get cases outside of the setting. So, for example, outside of the home, outside of the workplace, where in particular you may not know where the person actually contracted the disease from. And it's very clear here this is a case of person-to-person transmission.
Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Doctors are pleading with people who suspect they may have COVID-19 to stay home and seek help over the phone rather than visiting medical centres. An Auckland woman tested positive for the virus on Tuesday night after being swabbed by her GP. She walked into the Westgate Medical Centre without calling ahead. The clinic says the doctor who saw her is now in isolation until March the 16th. The patient flew home from Italy via Singapore last week. She felt unwell on Monday, but made a return trip to Palmerston North the same day. The woman also visited 2 medical clinics, one of them Westgate. It says no other staff were in close contact with the woman and they remain at work. Te Wānanga o Aotearoa says one of its students is in self-isolation after being in close contact with the same woman. A student from its Palmerston North campus was in close contact with her and then attended a class. Te Wānanga o Aotearoa says in line with Ministry of Health advice, the Tauira has now isolated themselves. It says it has identified about 35 students in the building at the same time, but they don't have an increased risk of contracting the virus. All students have been notified. The National MP David Bennett has faced heavy criticism for saying people should be panic buying in the face of the coronavirus. The Hamilton East MP told a local radio station people should be concerned about the government's response and should prepare by stockpiling. In a statement, Mr Bennett says in hindsight he realised his comments were not helpful. An inmate at Auckland's Pāremoremo prison is dead after being attacked by another prisoner this afternoon. A statement from the Department of Corrections says the inmate was assaulted in the yard shortly before 3 p.m. Prison staff moved to stop the attack and provided medical assistance. Corrections says it'll carry out a full investigation and provide CCTV footage and any other evidence to the police. The police say officers attended shortly after 3 and the person died at the scene. The family of a man who died while in care of the Waikato DHB mental health unit says the Ombudsman's report into conditions at the centre are just the tip of the iceberg. The report outlined overcrowding and a number of other issues at the Henry Rongomo Bennett Centre after unannounced inspections last September. Jane Stevens, whose son Nicky took his own life, says the report doesn't go far enough.
The overcrowding leads to all the kind of issues that we're talking about in terms of the poor quality of care, the issues that for the staff working there, the safety issues. Going through such awful experiences means that many people don't want to engage with mental health services, and that creates huge risk for everybody.
Jane Stevens is calling for an independent inspection of mental health services at the Waikato DHB. It's coming up to 6:04. The New Zealand squash player Paul Cole has come up just short of a significant triumph on the PSA World Tour. The world number 5 has given up a 2-game lead to lose a 5-game final to second-ranked Ali Farag of Egypt at the Windy City Open in Chicago. Cole had beaten the world number 1 and number 4 en route to the final, but was not quite able to finish the job in the title decider. Olympic gold medalist Blair Tuke says the juggling act he and sailing sidekick Peter Burling are performing is proving ideal preparation for the Tokyo Olympics. The 6-time 49er world champions are balancing their games campaign with preparations for the looming defence of the Ald Mug with Team New Zealand. Tuke admits it's a hectic schedule, but says it's working well.
Us doing 49er sailing helps us to be better sailors for Team New Zealand, and, the work we're doing at Team New Zealand really gives us a benefit in the 49er sailing. So as long as you get the time management right and we do enough sailing in the 49er to keep the time in between us and intuition and all that sort of stuff up there, then, we're better for it, and seeing that now, managed to keep improving and being better as the years go on.
Blair Tuke. The Blues have handed Akira Ioane his first start of the Super Rugby season. Ioane has missed out on the number 8 jersey so far, thanks to the impressive form of 21-year-old Hoskin Sotutu. But with Sotutu rested after the Blues' 2 wins in South Africa, the one-match All Black gets the number 8 jersey for Saturday night's clash with the Hurricanes in Wellington. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we're at the intersection of science, fact and fiction with Axonite, a thinking material that made its sci-fi debut in 1971 on Doctor Who. Bill Williams looks at the real-life possibilities. Fergus Barrowman has some fresh jazz releases. This week's overseas correspondent, Reem Abbas, is on the line from Sudan. And fresh from having a kakapo named after her, Alison Ballance has the latest on our changing world on Nights from Aotearoa News at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly in the east and in the north for Auckland. Waikato to Taranaki, including Central High Country and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine with a few cloudy periods. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy periods and a few showers. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, also Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, low cloud about inland valleys early tomorrow morning, then high cloud developing. For Fiordland, fine today, becoming cloudy with the odd coastal shower tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and 1 or 2 showers. RNZ National. It's 6:06.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. An inmate at the country's highest security prison has died this afternoon in what corrections describe as a prisoner-on-prisoner assault. Police are investigating the attack in Auckland Prison at Paremoremo. And joining me now for more on this is Corrections Association National President Alan Whitley. Alan, what can you tell us about what's happened here?
Yeah, what we understand is there was an incident between 2 prisoners in a yard at the prison today. And one prisoner's managed to stab another prisoner, and it's resulted in that prisoner dying.
You say stabbed. Do you know the nature of the weapon used?
No, we've got no details about the weapon used at all.
Okay. So how many prison officers were there? And was this during exercise time or unlock, or what was the scenario?
Yeah, well, it's only recently happened, so our details are a little bit scant, but it would have been during normal exercise time in a yard. And if you've got 2 prisoners in a yard there, you need at least 8 staff to extract them. And we understand that the staff responded extremely quickly and very professionally in trying circumstances to get the prisoners apart and try and provide life support.
How many staff were there?
Well, I don't know all the details, but what I do know is it would have taken a minimum of 8 staff to be there to extract those prisoners from the yard.
Do you mean
that's the ratios we work to?
Do you mean that's the requirement when there's an incident, or that would have been the requirement while people were unlocked in the area?
That's the requirement to move maximum security prisoners.
Okay. So how are the staff members who were involved in this?
We don't know that at this point in time. We're putting stuff in place to get up to the prison this week to provide support for anybody and everybody that was around that incident and how they're feeling about it. It takes a toll on you. None of the staff are injured, but they've had to witness a horrific incident, and that in itself has a sort of an effect on their well-being.
Absolutely. Would these staff members have been wearing body cameras?
Yeah, they should have had cameras on. They would have had stab-proof vests on.
What can you tell us about, this is alleged to be a prisoner-on-prisoner assault. What's going on in terms of assault numbers behind bars at the moment?
We've gone through a period of time where the assault numbers behind bars have increased quite dramatically over the last 18 months to 2 years, and it's something we've been raising with corrections. We want to get those assault rates down.
And so do you have any specific concerns in relation to this incident?
Yeah, we've always got concerns of any incident in the prison or any find in the prison of a weapon, and we very recently, as of yesterday morning, raised at a meeting in Wellington that we'd like to see prisoners that are caught with shanks charged under the Criminal Justice Act under Section 202A, because it's an offence to carry an offensive weapon. The only reason you carry a shank in a prison is to stab somebody.
So how is it normally dealt with if someone's found to have contraband that would pass as a shank?
It's generally dealt with via our internal disciplinary system, where they could end up on OPs, maybe a little bit of time in isolation.
So you actually want criminal charges?
Yeah, we want criminal charges, because if you hold somebody to a higher level account because they've got something that can be used as a weapon, we might see a reduction in the amount of prisoners that are willing to carry weapons or hold weapons.
So a shank, something modified into a knife, something that can be whittled down to be used to stab someone. How would a prisoner in there have a weapon like that?
Weapons in prison are fashioned from all sorts of things. They get their toothbrushes and they sharpen those on a piece of concrete, and then they stab somebody with a sharpened toothbrush. They get access to a ballpoint pen if they can, and they'll use that to stab people. They'll try and find any object they can and modify it to use it as a weapon.
Do you know who the dead prisoner is?
No, I've got no details about that whatsoever.
All right. Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is the Corrections Association National President, Alan Whitley, speaking there about the death of a prisoner at Auckland Prison in Poremoremo. That death comes after a prisoner-on-prisoner assault, and the police are investigating. Could this be the return of doctors' house calls and car park visits in the wake of coronavirus? A primary health organisation is warning people with symptoms that could be COVID-19 not to wander unannounced into medical clinics, as they could be putting other patients at risk. ProCare contracts the services of the Westgate Medical Centre, where a woman, later confirmed to have coronavirus, walked into urgent care without letting doctors know she was coming, despite signs saying people recently returned from overseas with symptoms should not enter. The doctor who swabbed her is now also in isolation. ProCare's clinical director, Dr. Alan Moffat, says if you are displaying symptoms of concern, don't just show up.
It is still possible that people walk into a clinic without seeing the sign or reading it or just disregard it. In that case, actually, people aren't greatly at risk because the virus really you need close contact over about 15 minutes to be sort of at risk. So obviously different if they're coughing actively in front of people, within a metre, that's a concern. And so that's why we like them to phone first, because we can arrange for a mask to be fitted and so forth so that they don't spread their germs.
A staff member has contacted the media around this. Why would you think they would do it? Because they're saying it's because they're deeply concerned.
Well, I'm actually really surprised and disappointed that a staff member would do that. They should raise it with management of the clinic, but I can understand all healthcare workers being concerned because, of course, this does put healthcare workers in the front line at risk. But providing you follow the ministry guidelines and wear appropriate protection, then, this thing's really, it's quite safe to see patients and treat them appropriately. And that's why it's essential that the public do ring first rather than front up with cough. Now, while we don't have community spread in the country, it's only people that have travelled that we need to be concerned about. So the staff at general practice clinics don't need to be concerned about, the general public rocking up. It's only people that have travelled, and I think it's generally well known now that those people should not front up to their clinic without phoning first.
In saying that, someone did do that. So I'm wondering how many of your patients at that clinic are now having to be contacted by the Ministry of Health. Do you know how many there are?
No, I don't know that, and it is important that they track where the person was and how that came about, and I believe that is underway. But the risk is actually very, very low. The proper procedure should be that when somebody comes in who has travelled, that they get isolated in a room with a mask to minimise harm to other patients and to the staff.
So what is the situation with the doctor who treated this woman?
Look, I'm not familiar with the details of the case, so if there was concern, if the doctor had spent a reasonable length of time with the person, that doctor will be in isolation, so will now have to stand down for 14 days until, he's proven negative or she's proven negative.
Yes, so the doctor is being stood down until about March 16th, I believe it is. So
that would be right.
How many patients would that doctor have seen after contact with the patient who is a confirmed case?
There's no risk of a contact of somebody with, or the experts are saying that there's no risk of a contact of somebody who has had exposure to the virus actually spreading the virus. The peak time for this virus to spread is really when symptoms appear and then for the next 5 to 6 days. So, we're being careful with 14 days, but the peak time is really from when symptoms appear. So prior to that, we don't think that there's a high risk that people will get infected. And certainly in an acute situation where somebody's just been seen within hours of the contact, there is no risk, so long as the doctor concerned has followed proper infection control around washing hands, and that's the key thing about surfaces and hand washing.
In saying that, this doctor has now been stood down, though. So, and
the
presumably
doctor has been stood down because there's a risk that doctor may actually be infected, but there's no risk of that doctor transferring that infection to anybody else. That's why we put them in isolation until we know, in case he becomes symptomatic. But
Understood.
if he doesn't become symptomatic, then there's no risk to other people, or if the viral swabs prove negative.
Understood, but there was a 2-day delay in doing that because that doctor continued to work, as I understand it.
And as I state, and as the Director General has also stated to the public around the Westlake, school students, there is no risk to the public, there is no risk to those students, and there's no risk to the patients that doctor saw from having been seen over those 2 days.
But the scenario that we've just talked through, it's not the ideal situation what happened, is it? So what would you like to say to people about how they deal with this if they think that they're showing symptoms?
Absolutely right. And, it's so imperative that people don't just front up to the doctors and front up to the reception desk. They must call before coming in, or even better than that, before leaving to see the doctor, they can call the 0800 coronavirus line. So it's 0800 358 5453, and those people are skilled around what the advice should be, whether they need to see somebody. If they need to see somebody, then what the process should be.
And the reason you do that, the reason you ring ahead and don't enter the clinic, is because if you don't, you could be putting people at risk, right?
Yeah, to protect the public from further spread if they ended up being a positive case.
So would a scenario in this case, would a doctor go out to the car park to see someone perhaps, or away from the clinic?
Yes, we have been doing that. There's a range of possibilities, actually, including house calls. If somebody's a very high risk, and it seems very likely, then, it includes house calls. But definitely we can see somebody and assess them in the car and do the swabs as necessary. Actually, the risk is not high to get them into the clinic, so long as they've got proper protection there. So, a person can attend without touching surfaces on the way through, have a mask put on their face. We do need to then clean the room down after they've left, but there's no risk to the public in somebody walking through the waiting room.
But can you understand how a staff member might feel slightly aggrieved by the situation, that they may have been put at risk? by this
I think
particular
it's
person?
a key thing for all clinics to consider to make sure these staff is safe. If somebody arrives at front desk and coughs all over you and you subsequently find out that they've just returned from China, obviously that's not an ideal situation. But equally, and so we need to do the utmost possible to protect our healthcare workers, and that's what we do. So some practices, are taking extra precautions around that. Right now, I don't believe that that's necessary. The best defence is to make sure that people don't front up if they meet the case definition, which is widely available and known.
That's ProCare's Clinical Director, Dr. Alan Moffat. The coronavirus outbreak could deal a double blow to the fragile economies of Pacific countries. Travel restrictions have been imposed by most of the region's governments, with flight numbers slashed and cruise ships turned around. Already, the economic impacts are being felt in countries like Samoa, which was hard hit by the measles epidemic late last year. RNZ Pacific's Jamie Tahana reports.
This time last year, Samoa's tourism industry was humming, year-on-year growth and new marketing campaigns in Asia. Then in November, a measles epidemic arrived from New Zealand. 83 people, mostly children, were killed. Hundreds of holiday bookings cancelled. Much of the country was shut down. The chief executive of the Samoa Tourism Authority, Fa'amatoainu Lenatai Soifua, says the emergence of the coronavirus has dealt another blow.
It's quite a really big impact, as we have more than 5,000 employees in the industry, as well as some of the sporting services. So we're trying as much as possible to keep the industry afloat. A lot of the hotels, a lot of the properties, they've actually reported cancellation as well as a decrease in terms of the bookings and sales.
The Samoa government has imposed travel restrictions and slashed the number of flights allowed into the country to ward off the arrival of COVID-19. Fa'amatoainu says while he understands and supports the government's actions, especially in the wake of the measles, it's going to be rough for the industry.
For the last quarter of the financial year, we're expecting a 20 to 25% drop in terms of the arrivals as well as the earnings from the industry. So it's quite a really big impact.
Other countries, Fiji, New Caledonia, Vanuatu, the Cook Islands and others, have imposed similar measures. But if there's one relief for the South Pacific, it's that it's the quiet season. That's not the case above the equator. The Northern Marianas, a US territory on the fringe of Asia, is in the midst of what its governor calls a crisis. It's peak season there, and usually around this time, there's tens of thousands of holidaymakers from China, South Korea and Japan, three of the worst hit countries. The chair of the Marianas Hotel Association, Gloria Kavanagh, says numbers have plummeted from 95% to 23% occupancy.
Tourism is the only economy here in Saipan. And with the numbers going down, it's a domino effect. It is a huge crisis here.
Already, restaurants are closing down and shops have reduced hours. The downtown tourist area resembles a ghost town. With the economy already reeling from a super typhoon a year ago, the territory's government this week introduced severe austerity measures. Public service pay has been slashed, school weeks reduced to 4 days, and the governor, Ralph Torres, wrote to President Donald Trump asking for immediate help. Ms. Kavanagh says thousands of jobs in the tourism industry are on the line.
Hotels are shutting down different sections of their hotels. They're cutting back on services, and that means they're cutting back hours on with their employees. And there are some that are actually laying off people. It's really hit very hard, and it doesn't look like we're going to be turning this around anytime soon. So it's just a matter of survival.
An economist at the University of the South Pacific, Nilesh Gaunda, says it's still early days, but impacts are already starting to be seen in island countries. He says tourism industries will be hit if the outbreak is prolonged, the supply chain from China will be withered, and the region will be affected by any global slowdown. However, Dr. Gaunda says a lot of it will come down to how Australia and New Zealand handle it.
The Pacific was sort of protected slightly until now, but as we're seeing the impact of the virus in Australia and New Zealand, we now cannot say that the Pacific is really not going to be largely impacted.
Further down the line, Nilesh Gaunda says the outbreak could possibly affect economic relationships with China, including aid projects and the Grand Belt and Road Plan. For Checkpoint, ko Jamie Tahana aho.
The coronavirus outbreak isn't just having an impact on the Pacific's travel and tourism industry. Iran and South Korea are among the top countries where airlines are cancelling service due to increased reports of the virus. Air New Zealand too is making further cuts to domestic, Trans-Tasman and Asia services to counter the impact of COVID-19. Qantas, Jetstar and Virgin Australia have all cut services to Asia and New Zealand because of the virus. It is a growing trend across the world as countries adopt tough measures and close doors. CNN's Richard Quest has been looking at the impact.
The travel industry has faced many shocks of different types before, but this is something different.
The last time we've seen anything close to this was post 9/11.
It's the range and scale of industry that's truly worrying. Think about it. It's more than just planes and trains. It's the hotels where we stay, the restaurants we dine at, the credit cards we use for expenses. Giant companies like Nestle and Unilever have restricted almost all business travel. And massive trade shows like Mobile World Congress have been cancelled, along with even travel trade shows such as ITB. It's creating a cascading threat to the travel industry and the millions of people who depend on it.
If there's nobody traveling on planes, there's nobody staying in hotels. If no one's staying in hotels, no one's going to restaurants, no one's using taxi cabs, Ubers, chauffeured cars, or anything else. Everything kind of stops, and that's the problem.
Busy routes disappeared altogether at the height of the outbreak as travellers stayed home. Now, major European and transatlantic routes are also being cancelled because of falling demand. All told, IATA says it will cost airlines more than $29 billion this year.
It is not good. I'm talking to people who say that this is the worst crisis for airlines since at least 2008 and maybe post 9/11. People right now don't want to travel.
The cruise industry has been particularly hard hit. Last month, thousands of people were confined on board 2 cruise ships amid fears of spreading the virus. Coronavirus was detected on only one of the ships. There are fresh restrictions as companies deny boarding to passengers deemed at risk. Cruise line share prices have tumbled heavily. And some countries are turning ships away from ports that rely on the constant flow of tourists. So look at the effects on some of the major players across 3 areas. Cruise lines, Carnival, straight the way down. United Airlines, with all those Asian routes out of the West Coast, also a big faller. And the largest hotel group in the world, Marriott, have seen some very serious falls, down some 21%.
This is a new twist. It's the black swan that landed on your lawn. Nobody ever wants the black swan showing up, but we had one show up. But you know, the world is resilient. Humans are resilient. There's always a solution. It's just a matter of how much time is it going to take to find the solution that's necessary.
The travel and tourism industry is huge. It's estimated 10% of the global workforce is in some way connected to travel and tourism. So with all its vulnerabilities, the industry is worried but well practiced at dealing with crises.
And that's the CNN's Richard Quest with that report. It is 26 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The football Ferns striker Sarah Gregorius says her second retirement is a decision set in stone. Gregorius played her 100th match for New Zealand in their penalty shootout win over Belgium at the Algarve Cup in Portugal this morning. After the match, the 32-year-old promptly announced it had been her last. Gregorius retired after the 2016 Olympics before returning in 2018. But she told Clay Wilson this decision is much more definitive, and she's grateful coach Tom Simani convinced her to go to Portugal and collect her 100th cap before saying goodbye.
It was something that I was very fortunate, I suppose, to have that opportunity extended to me, but also one that I couldn't turn down. And I think I sort of knew within myself that I couldn't give the team everything that it deserved and the commitment that it required with my new role overseas and my sort of non-footballing career heading in the direction that it has headed. So I think for me it was as soon as I realised that I couldn't make the commitment required and couldn't be the best possible Fern that I have been in the past and that the team requires for the future moving forward, particularly in such a big year. It was a difficult decision, but at the same time quite an easy one.
I know you've just had a moment or a bit of a presentation with the rest of the team after the match. Can you tell me what that was like?
Yeah, sure. It involved some video footage. I have played for this team for 10 years, so it was sort of baby-faced Sarah at the start and obviously a little bit of a different looking one at the end, so that was quite fun to, I guess, reflect and look back, and saw a few stats of my career, and then the girls said some lovely words, and then I actually got roasted quite badly as well on top of that. So it was quite emotional, but at the same time pretty funny and pretty hard case, and yeah, pretty perfect actually.
The team's been through a lot in recent years, and what was it like to go through that, and I guess where do you see the team now and how it's placed to move forward?
Yeah, we've certainly been through a lot, particularly off the field, particularly in the last couple of years. So it's been huge, but I think with anything, when you sort of pick yourself up off the floor, you're always in a better space and you've learned a lot. And I think this team has a different sense of appreciation and protection of its culture and protection of its identity. And I think for me, as long as the team holds on to that moving forward, they'll always be in a good space, and it'll always be a place where I think players are encouraged as people to be themselves and express themselves both on the field and off the field. And I think if the team can retain its core identity in that sense, it'll always be in a good place, and I think it'll always be a place where people can flourish. It's been tough, I think, to learn those lessons and to have been through some of the things that we've been through, but the way I see it, this team sometimes doesn't actually realise its potential or how incredible it really is, and I just hope that they keep hold of what makes the group special, and I think there's special things to come.
And just on your own.
And that was football Fern striker Sarah Gregorius speaking there to Clay Wilson after announcing her retirement following her 100th match for New Zealand. Barry's got in touch and says if you're out of hand sanitizer, go to the chemist or supermarket, go to the bottle store, get a vodka, cheap bottle of vodka, dilute it 50-50 and sanitise away. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The country's newest case of COVID-19 appears to be the first caught and transmitted here. Doctors are pleading with people who suspect they may have the coronavirus to stay home and seek help over the phone rather than visiting medical centres. An inmate at Auckland's Peremoremo prison has died after being attacked by another prisoner this afternoon. The police are speaking to a 58-year-old man in relation to a homicide investigation in Christchurch. And the Waikato DHB says its mental health unit has made changes since an unannounced inspection last September, which found overcrowding and the use of seclusion and physical restraints. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7 o'clock, and then it's Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Bernie Sanders still calls himself a democratic socialist. Even though he caucuses with the Democratic Party, he's